This is
Make It Plain.
Make It Plain.
MIP
With Masamela Matfumo.
Mark Thompson.
Make It Plain.
Get woke.
Ladies and gentlemen, someone who has been down in Brunswick for quite some time, months in fact, leading up to the trial. She was there before many, or any were for that matter, in support of the Ahmaud Arbery family. We thought we'd do well to hear directly from her, and after all, she is an attorney also. Today, the closing arguments will be completed. The prosecution will have the last word, and then there will be jury instructions, and then this trial of the murderers of Ahmaud Arbery will go to the jury. We're happy to have with us from the Transformative Justice Coalition. And let me also mention someone who has been a civil rights leader for decades. We all came to know and love her at the Lawyers Committee of Civil Rights under law, and then she formed her own organization, the Transformative Justice Coalition. No stranger to Make It Plain. We welcome back Attorney Barbara Arnwine. Barbara, how are you?
I'm good, and it's a pleasure to be on your show again. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you back. So you have been down there really organizing the community and being supportive of the family really since this happened, since the incident happened, haven't you?
Yes, actually, I met the family last year and made a pledge to them to stand by their side through all of the legal proceedings. I didn't know at that time that there were going to be three. I knew there was a murder trial, that there would be a murder trial. I didn't know there was going to be a hate crimes trial. And I did not realize that there was going to be the indictment of the former prosecutor, which is good news.
Yeah.
But we are committed to that. So the Transformative Justice Coalition, myself and my co-leader, the mighty attorney Daryl D. Jones, is also has been here. We've been here since roughly our first action, believe it or not, was on October the 17th for this trial, the day before jury selection started.
Yeah, that's very, very important. How do you feel about the trial, and maybe compare and contrast it with what we just saw in the Rittenhouse trial?
Well, I say the Rittenhouse trial, Julius Jones, and the Arbery trial are all part of an arc. And it's an arc of the failure of the criminal justice system. In fact, I don't even call it that. I call it the criminal injustice system, because there's so little justice for African Americans in this system. So I call it an arc. And I mean, and you know what's interesting? In all three of those cases, they all three originate from the same systemic failure of the system, and that is the failure of law enforcement to do their job in a non-racist way. So in Rittenhouse, you have the law enforcement not even arresting the man because they assume that he's not a threat, and then when they do arrest him, he's given all this favorable treatment, right? And you get into, and so you see that problem in the Julius Jones case. Law enforcement refused to do the investigation of the case, would not allow the prosecutor, have misconduct in that case. Just like we got misconduct in the Ahmaud Arbery case. The Ahmaud Arbery case, law enforcement told by the prosecutor not to arrest the men the day of the killing, before they even processed them, not to arrest them, and telling one of the defendants to go home and wash up before they presented themselves at the police headquarters. And then you had so in all three of those, you got these law enforcement failures, and in two of them, two of them you have really abusive prosecutorial failures and judges. The biases of judges. I mean, I felt that in the Rittenhouse case, I called it weeks ago. I said there was no way he would be convicted because of the behavior of the judge and the bias of the judge. If I were sitting on that jury, why the jury would be very, what would you call it? I mean, they would be, very desolate or, very disillusioned, because it was clear to me that even if they had found him guilty, that the judge was going to set aside their verdict. And they do that. Judges have that power and that authority to set aside verdicts. And he was so biased that I never felt that he would allow the verdict to be held here. In the Arbery case, you got a judge who found intentional discrimination in the defense, excluding 11 of the 12 Black jurors, but still allowed the case to proceed and did not reseat any of those jurors. So, so you have these issues, even though I think overall he's been even-handed and he's been pretty strong about, following the law in this case, and it's driving the defense crazy. People are wondering, why is the defense acting so crazy, Mark, in the Arbery case? It's because they're accustomed to being given a lot of white privilege. And this case is very unusual, people, because the judge is not from Glenn County, because every single Glenn County judge recused themselves, said that they had something to do with some kind of conflict, that none of them could hear this case. So he comes out of Savannah. The prosecution, because of all the prosecutorial misconduct, not only by Jackie Johnson, the first prosecutor, but by Barnhill. And so you have the cases being tried by the Cobb County prosecutorial office. So you don't even have Glenn County involved at all in the prosecution of this case. So that just shows you how much misconduct, how many failures there are. So all of these cases are tied in that web of the failure of the criminal justice system.
And what do you think about the prosecutors in this case? After all, I mean, they got, I guess it was Travis McMichael to pretty much say that Ahmaud Arbery was no threat. I mean, whether they did so accidentally on purpose, the prosecutors seem to have gotten a lot of good evidence of guilt before the jury.
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely. The prosecutors in this case want to convict these guys. This is no walk. This is no pretense. They absolutely want to convict these guys. And they're, doing everything in their power to make a good case to convict them with. I think, they made some mistakes at the beginning of this case regarding the jury. I think there were some mistakes made. And I think that in general, they're a little bit softer in some ways than a lot of us attorneys would be. But I think on the argument and on this and throughout the case, they've been very good about getting the evidence in, cross-examining really hard, and in the closing statement, she was brilliant. She's been good. She was good in her opening. She was, and I'm talking about the lead prosecutor, Linda Donikowski. She's been really excellent. Good is what I should say. I mean, I think that I've seen, lawyers who are spectacular. She's very, very good.
Very good. More MIP after this message. So, closing arguments today, folks. Finalized prosecution. Donikowski presumably will close those out, and then the jury instructions will take place. The jury, to be clear, was not in the courtroom when Kevin Goff, the defense attorney, was making the case about how he didn't want any black pastors in the room. Is that right? That
is correct. And, remember, this is at least his 8th motion that he made today. He made 5 motions to get rid of the Transformative Justice Coalition. 5. And we have appeared in, I think, 6 of his 8 motions, including on black pastors. He's always tried to get rid of us because of his, anger that black people would show up in Glenn County and actually protest at the courthouse and demand justice. They're accustomed, like I'm trying to tell people, this system here is so corrupt that they're not accustomed to black people challenging their behavior. He's the only person on this entire legal involvement who is from Glenn County, outside of Glenn County. And you can see his biases and his racism showing through. You know what's so sad, Mark? Do you realize that the NAACP and some other groups supported him? Ralph used to be the public defender for Glenn County. Can you imagine?
Wow.
All for Black people he was the public defender for? Because his racial attitude is clearly pre-existing. But at the same time, he apparently took on, the former prosecutor, Jackie Johnson, because she was so corrupt. And he apparently complained a lot about her corruption. So that made him popular with the African-American leadership. Even though the clients were complaining that he was selling them down the river, that their cases weren't being handled right, all kinds of things. He eventually ends up being fired from his job. And ever since we've been here, he's been totally racist, wanting to get rid of us, not wanting the Transformative Justice Coalition on the grounds. He said all kind of racist stuff during the trial. I've been disgusted with him the entire proceeding. But the NAACP, because had endorsed him. I guess they thought in this county that was the best they could get. I don't understand it. But in any event, I understand that that one of the Black organizations in Savannah has hired him to do a reparations case. Because, yes, that he has been hired by a group of Black organizations to do a reparations case. I hope they fired him after all of this. But it's just a reminder, folks, really look at who you retain to represent you. Don't just go on the okie doke that this is good enough. No, really get some real advocates. They exist. There are some good attorneys out there. Don't just be thinking, oh, well, if he's white, that's going to appeal to the white establishment, whatever. Stop that.
So let me just ask you, because I want to understand something. If the jury can't see his antics, who is what all the stuff he's saying about you and Black pastors shouldn't be in the courtroom?
Right.
And I mean, does he really believe, is it a fact that your very presence there could influence the jury? I mean, is that a valid concern at all?
No. You know what our presence means? Our presence means three really big things. One is that the Arbery family's not alone, and they've been prayed for and comforted every single day. And that they're not isolated, which you got to understand, Mark, when I first met the family, they were talking about not even coming to the trial.
Yeah.
So depressed. They were so, convinced that no one would support them. The second thing we've done that's been very important is to support the community, to be activists. Because in this community, most people don't understand Southern Georgia. And it doesn't matter if it's Southwest Georgia or Southeast Georgia. Your Black middle class basically comes out of, they work out of Florida. In the Southwest, they work in Alabama and Florida. Because a lot of these employers are so strict and so conservative that if they feel that a Black person is being active or radical or whatever, they won't hire them. And they actually have in some counties what they call blacklists, where all the white employers have shared a list of banned employees. So it's odd that when you go to Early County and some other counties, you'll find out that the majority of their Black middle class works in Atlanta and comes home on weekends, just like apartheid, right? Like apartheid. They work during the week in Atlanta area, and they come home on the weekends, or they work in Alabama, or they work in Florida. Same thing. So in this area, they have the Black community scared. And a lot of people were so scared that they weren't going to come out and support the Arbery family. And what we've done by coming here, demonstrating, marching several times through the Black communities, we have started activism like they haven't seen locally.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have stepped up, have discovered that they have a voice, that they can be heard, and have started taking on leadership roles, including the Arbery family. Good Lord. I mean, they got some serious organizers who have started, developing and doing their thing. And I'm so proud of them. The third objective was to make sure this case did not get swept under the rug.
Right.
As you and I know, Mark, every day there are cases like Ahmaud Arbery, police misconduct, white vigilantism that just gets swept under the rug. They never get uplifted. I meet these families in tears and in pain because their cases have never really been pursued. So we wanted to lift up this case as an example to the nation, not only because of what's at stake with this white vigilantism, but I want people to understand how powerful the Arbery family has been in organizing to fight for justice. Because had it not been for the family, remember I told you about that corrupt district attorney, there never would have been any charges brought against these people.
Yeah.
There would have been the release of the video. The family forced all that to happen. So give Wanda Cooper Jones, give Marcus Arbery, give that family all the credit. And I think that if we could teach more families across the country to do what they did.
More MIP after this message. That is very important. It's also important just from, the courtroom culture and atmosphere, isn't it, Barbara? In any trial where there's been a crime of violence,
yes,
Black or white, it is important for the family to be represented and for the jury to see that the family has support, because that does something to the jury too. I mean, there are cases when ain't nobody there. And if the jury sees that either the family's not fully engaged or the family supporters aren't engaged, then the jury's not that engaged, right? That's just an actual human reality, right?
Well, I think that what happens is what you call the atmosphere of the community, right?
Right.
Because if the community does not get involved and engaged, then the ethics of, the morality of what, what is at stake is not felt. Now, I got to say a couple things about this community that I found, fascinating. I mentioned to you all the suppression, all the efforts to keep people from being active. I mentioned to you how strong and beautiful the Arbery family has been in demanding justice, but they were doing it by themselves.
Yeah.
When I came to that first trial here, the first pre-trial in March, I was shocked, Mark. There was nobody here. Nobody. But the family. So when people in the community starts hearing that, the family really cares, that they are persisting and fighting for justice, it makes them a little bit bolder. Because remember, Black lives are considered unimportant. That's why the tagline is Black Lives Matter.
That's right.
Because we're undervalued. It's just another Black kid dead. It's the way the world sees it. And how do you humanize? How do you, bring across to the nation the reality that this precious life has been lost? Listen to what the defense said today. In her closing, Laura Hogue, representing Greg McMichael, said that that when you see that beautiful teenager picture of Ahmaud Arbery, that you got to understand that he deteriorated after that. Really? What evidence? That he, quote, deteriorated. Somebody 25 years old who was getting ready to go back to school, who fought with his sister to get her through, that she's got her master's degree, who did all these wonderful things in this community. What are they talking about? They just, it's this ability to just paint us as criminals and to paint our children as worthless. So I'm very, very proud of what this community's been able to do to say Ahmaud Arbery, somebody who needed to be loved, he ought to be alive. Yeah. And so I just think that's, so important that message is out there, Mark.
This case will go to the jury today. As we've said, folks, you've been in the courtroom, Barbara Arnwine. You've seen the jury. Any impressions of the jurors? You're at liberty to, now, first of all, to be clear, so there are 11 white jurors, right?
That's correct.
So any impressions of these jurors? Are the jurors, is any body language? I mean, you've been an attorney for years, so I know you know how to look at these things. Anything you're at liberty to share with us that might give us a glimpse of what might happen or what they might be thinking? Have they been attentive? Have they, just what's been their demeanor?
Well, their demeanor has been very involved. I mean, they've been really focused on this case, really listening intensely. And remember that Goff, made his motion to exclude the Black pastors after he saw some members of the jury emotionally react to Wanda Cooper Jones crying. And when they were emotionally reacting, it was sympathy. And that's why he got so angry. But also, it's been clear to me, based on other things that I won't talk about watching this case, is that they're worried about this jury. The defense is. And they don't think that certain people in the jury like them. And they've been trying to get rid of, yes, Mark, they've still been trying to get rid of more jurors. And you also saw, if everybody's, if you've been watching this case, you saw the other day that after Travis McMichael, who shot and killed Ahmaud, that after his testimony, they had 3 white women testifying a row. One white woman testifying to what her husband said to her. Why didn't they have the white male husband on the stand? And that's because the majority of the jury is white women. And they were doing that purposefully to appeal to the white women on that jury. And so that was the damsel in distress, the poor white woman under attack by the bad Black man who's in the neighborhood, scaring my children. They did a lot of that in the closing today also, to try to remind the white women that, that it was other white women like yourselves who were scared. So they're pulling this race card all the way. And they're, portraying, they're using the stereotypes to portray Ahmaud as a criminal, of course, because he's young and Black. And they're using the stereotype of the poor white woman under attack in her neighborhood. When they talk about the neighborhood was under attack, that's what they mean. They're using that racial appeal there, and it's racial gender appeal. So it's really ugly. And even though everybody keeps saying that the case shouldn't be about race, it is. It's all about race. And it's very, very vicious.
Yeah. So again, the jury will get this case. We will see what happens. Lastly, Barbara, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, you're the attorney, not me. It is looking at the Rittenhouse case and the way that prosecution performed,
yes,
versus the case in Brunswick and the way that prosecution, I think the prosecution in Brunswick has done a better job.
No doubt about it.
Am I wrong?
No doubt about it. And no doubt about it. I mean, the prosecution in Brunswick knew their narrative. And they came in. They had a story they were going to tell the jury.
Right.
Analysis of what happened. They wanted the jury to understand that analysis. They charged based on what they thought the evidence would support. So they came in strong on this case. Whereas in Kenosha, in this, sadly, in this case with Rittenhouse, the prosecution was very late coming up with a narrative to explain what happened. Which just shows what happens when you got all these, different racial perspectives on your prosecution team. And then also the other big difference here is that this prosecutor, her hands weren't as tied as the hands were tied in Kenosha, because your judge has a lot to do with it. Like you were saying, all those back room, all those discussions people don't see. The judge in the Rittenhouse case was extremely biased. And if people think that biased judges don't exist, look at the Corrine Gaines case right now. Poor Rhonda Dormius, her mother, is trying to reinstate a jury verdict that was given to her of $32 million for the unlawful killing of her daughter by the Baltimore County police department. And the judge set the verdict aside.
Right.
And the state Supreme Court recently said that he was too biased and that he should recuse himself. And he says he's not going to do so.
Mm-hmm.
So biased judges are a real problem. And that's what we saw in Rittenhouse. That you have a judge that had already decided the case should be an acquittal. And he did everything he could to make sure it would be one. Yeah.
He was practically another defense attorney.
Exactly.
But as you said earlier, even though the judge in this case would not resist the de-diversification, if you will, of the jury, he's not been as bad as the judge in the Rittenhouse case, correct?
No way it's bad. And wait to hear these jury instructions later on today.
Yeah.
His jury instructions that he gives to the jury, you're going to see that he's been pretty strong on the law.
Yeah, and he did. There was video of him admonishing the defense for their arguments against black pastors and the Kentucky Fried Chicken comment that Goff made.
Colonel said, what if they brought in Colonel Sanders, comparing Reverend Jackson and Reverend Sharpton to, Colonel Sanders? But it was worse than that, Mark. Because remember, he said wearing white mask. Who wears white mask?
Yeah.
The Ku Klux Klan. That's why when he said wearing white mask, remember what happens, everybody, is that the judge stops him.
Yeah.
Because he knew it was just going out of control. Before he can say anything else, race is crazy. Before he started talking about the Ku Klux Klan or DeForest, Bedford DeForest or anybody else, he stopped him. And I'm glad he did in a way, but a way it'd been good to just let him keep on hanging.
Yeah, I mean, because it makes a hell of a statement for him to invoke that. What if we brought in the Ku Klux Klan? I mean, why would you even say something like that unless you have some affinity with that side? Is the jury sequestered?
No, and will not be sequestered.
So I'm sorry. Again, I didn't go to law school, but why would I, as a lawyer, want to risk a juror seeing me say, what if I brought in the Ku Klux Klan to support me? Why would I want a jury to even see something like that?
Right. I mean, I think he's just ignorant.
Yeah, that's kind of accurate.
So racist, he's ignorant.
Yeah.
And he today his closing was horrible. Did you see that mess?
It was.
I mean, his closing argument yesterday was just horrible. And so I really think people need to understand, that this is why, as I started off, that you want to have really good lawyers representing you. And be very clear on these cases, folks. If somebody in your family is killed unlawfully in a racist manner, make sure you get lawyers who are there for your justice, not for the money, but for the justice, because there's a lot of, problems with the way some of these cases get handled. And I just really want to remind people that, look for good lawyers. Don't just take the first thing that comes across the keel, and don't take the first person who you hear about, or just because you heard that they did another case. Make sure you got somebody who's going to fight for you. And
that's
for
right. That's right. Interview them, get to know the lawyers, see what they stand for. That's right. Well, one great lawyer here with us today, folks, is Barbara Arnwine. She has been on the ground in Brunswick, and so thankful she's been there to give us firsthand account. She will be there for the duration, and we may check back in with you before it's all over with. Going to the jury today. Barbara, thank you for joining us as always on Make It Plain.
Yes, thank you. The jury will have the case today, and they are scheduled to meet, all day Wednesday. No, I'm sorry. They're scheduled to meet half a day Wednesday. They'll be off on Thursday, and they'll be back, I believe, on Friday. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Thanks for getting woke and listening to Make It Plain. Please remember to listen, like, and wherever you get your podcasts, please give the show a 5-star rating. And please do spread the word. Let's all continue to pray for each other during this pandemic and this police-demic. If all hearts and minds are clear, it has been made plain.